Hello, it's Carol Amendola Dianca here, and I am going to talk to you today about something very near and dear to my heart. Actually, it's near and dear to all of your hearts, and it is probably one of the most dangerous foods in the grocery store, if not the most dangerous. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it. In fact, I'm going to be using information that I did in my research for my master's degree thesis at Chicago Medical School. I became so engaged with trans fat in our food. It became a mission for me during graduate school, and I chose it as my topic because of it being so dangerous, and also because of how it's just a perfect example of what lobbying will do to the health of the nation when it's not in our best interest. So first of all, what is trans fat? I know in a previous video, I did a video about the 3 types of fat in our diet, which is monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, where we get mainly in plant-based foods, and then saturated fat that comes from mainly animal-based foods, and that's saturated fat in large quantities, sometimes for some people in small quantities, is not your friend when it comes to your health. So trans fat is a whole nother category of fat. It's not a naturally occurring fat, although it does occur in small amounts in some animal-based foods, and it is a naturally occurring trans fat. But for purposes of what we are talking about here, trans fat is fat that has actually been altered and manufactured from liquid vegetable oil. So manufacturers of foods that were looking for preservatives discovered that if they took vegetable oil and heated it and put hydrogen with it, that it would become solid at room temperature. And that way it would not spoil, and it would be acting as a preservative, a thickener, and something that would help stabilize shelf life. But what happens when the heat and the hydrogen is added to the oil is that it becomes solid, and we still don't even know, unless maybe it's just recently been discovered, the mechanism of how that happens. But what happens is we end up with trans fat. You may know it as hydrogenated fat. You may have seen hydrogenated fat on a food label, or partially hydrogenated, and my recommendation is to stay away from anything that's hydrogenated fat, because that is trans fat. So what does trans fat do when we consume it? It does just the opposite of what we would want our lipids to do. It lowers the HDL, which is a good cholesterol, high-density lipoprotein, and it raises LDL, low-density lipoprotein, which is what ends up getting oxidized in the arteries. And so that's exactly what we don't want. And so what happened is, as I was writing my thesis, I remember being aware of legislation that was going around in Congress to ban trans fat from the diet, the American diet. And then, of course, big food manufacturers came in and lobbyists came in and said, oh, no, it's really not that bad for you. And in certain amounts, it can be generally recognized as safe. There's that GRAS again. So in January 1st of 2006, legislation was passed to ban trans fat from our diets, except when it was generally recognized as safe. And what is that? That's less than half a gram of trans fat in food. So we still have it. It's still in our grocery stores. It's still being consumed. And where else do we find it? We find it in baked goods. It's in commercially prepared cookies, cakes, pies, shortening, of course, stick margarine. Stick margarine is almost all trans fat. I would not ever recommend that as a food source. Non-dairy coffee creams, creamers, refrigerated doughs, fried foods, French fries can have it, donuts, fried chicken, frozen pizzas. And if we think that we're just having generally recognized as safe as half a gram, that's only in one serving. So if we're having more than one serving of any of these foods, we're getting trans fat in our food. So look for partially hydrogenated fat. It could be partially hydrogenated sunflower oil or safflower oil, or hydrogenated fat, or hydrogelized. Any of those I would definitely stay away from. And again, this usually happens with foods that have a label. So we want to be very careful about eating foods with a label, because you almost have to be a scientist to read the label. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope that you will take this to heart, both physically and mentally, and watch for the trans fat in your food, eliminate it in all possible ways. If this has been helpful to you, please give me a like or subscribe, so I will continue to bring things to the forefront that maybe aren't in the news today, the things that could help you and avoid some of the pitfalls of what's in our food today. Thanks so much for joining. Please subscribe.